A lady here mentioned about it came up how I got into this here thing. I got a little quick story. Many years ago, there was a king over in Europe, and he was a very good king, matter of fact, and he had very little rules. Nobody was in prison. Everybody got along good because, he just was very good. So eventually he decided to reward a person, in his jurisdiction here. So he made an agreement that he lived in a castle, okay, and around it is a moat. You all familiar with like Fort Macon? Under this moat, it really had live stuff in it, not stuff you want to pet. So anyway, what he did, he put out a proclamation, anybody could swim across that moat and get to his castle, he was either going to give them gold or another castle. And so they set up a day to do it, and sure enough, all around that moat was people standing, looking in the moat. You know what I mean? And nobody was jumping in to try it. But all of a sudden, here comes the man across it. Sure enough, there he was swimming. Alligators right to his heels, spider, everything in the world you could think of. So anyway, he made it on the bank, and he crawled up on the bank, and one of his servants went up to him and brought him to the king, and the king said, "What do you want? Do you want the castle or the gold?" He says, "I want the man's address that pushed me in there." That's kind of like what I do a lot of times. Yeah, we kind of get pushed in stuff, and we just keep on going and make it look like we're doing good. Welcome you all. I appreciate you all. I see most of you. Today we're going to be talking about Cape Lookout Lighthouse. I've done it several times, and it seems like every time I'll learn something from somebody, and that's good. A lot of stories loom around Cape Lookout and the communities all around here where we live. And so very interesting things that has gone on over the past couple hundred years over there. My name is Heber Guthrie. My parents were Dorothy and Chancey Guthrie. I was raised on Harkers Island, and I lived there for about 19 years. And I married and moved off of the island. We moved way off of the island, about 7 miles away, about as far as I got. My wife was from Marshallburg, and I was from the island, so we just kind of settled in between us. We didn't want to get very close to our parents. But anyway, that's about as far away as we got. I was fortunate enough, I was raised in a boat building family. I'll tell you a little bit about Heber. I was raised up in a boat building family. Julian Guthrie was my uncle, very famous boat builder. And my brother Will learned from him and learned the trade from Julian. And so he got on his own in about 1967. And so that put me about a sophomore in high school. And so we had a program at that time in school called DE, Distributed Education. And what it was, you could leave school and go out on a job. And so that was perfect for me. My land, how much better could you get it? So every day at lunch, when I was a junior and a senior, I came home at lunchtime and I worked with my brother to his shop until about 4:30 when we quit. And so I picked up a lot of stuff from him. I learned very quickly to keep my mouth shut. When you're around professional people, don't try to tell them how to do stuff. You just watch them and listen. Use these here. And I learned that right away. And I learned a lot from him. Now, a lot he never did tell me. I think he just wanted me to figure it out for myself. But I wasted a lot of lumber doing that, trying to figure it out yourself. But anyway, I did get a chance, very fortunate to go to Cherry Point in 1972. And I worked there until 2007 when I retired. And then I went to work actually with my brother. There's 16 years difference in us. So growing up, it was like I had two fathers, So he was like my second father. So I worked with him. He was almost 70 in that age. And so he was getting up in age, but I went to work with him a couple of years building boats. Boat building had changed a lot from way back in the 60s. You can imagine now with all this coal mold stuff going on. But he was always up on it. He was always kind of leading the pack, I'll say, at this new modern stuff, and I enjoyed being with him during that time. Things kind of played out where I was working about 2010, and so the first time I did any kind of volunteer stuff, we built a boat at the Harkers Island Elementary School that year. And they were doing the history thing for the class. And I knew the principal, April Lilly, very good. And so the whole class, the whole 8th grade took part in building that skiff. And so that was kind of fun. Well, the next year, Smyrna went to do it. So then Harkers Island went to do one again. And then Smyrna went to do one again. And so now most of my time is out to what we call Dionysus Middle, which is the old Smyrna High School, is where I spend most of my winter months is with them. My summer months, I work out with the Island Express Ferry. This will be my 5th season coming up, and that's been real good for me. I get to meet a lot of people, and very enjoyable. I have found out everybody's just alike. We just live different places on the earth. You talk to them, they got the same problems we do. They're raising families, same thing we go through. So kind of you're not alone. You know, I find out I'm not alone with my problems because other people have the same thing. We do a tour. Mostly what I do on the Cape in the summer months is a tour. We have 2 trucks, pickup trucks. We pick up people not too far from the lighthouse, and we drive by the back side of the lighthouse, and we go all the way out to Cape Point, as far as we can, almost to the edge of the water. And we drop them off, and they spend ever how much time they want to spend. We pick them up, and we bring them back and go home every day. So I have got to see a lighthouse a lot, you know, every day. We make 10 trips a day, so I go past that lighthouse 2 times. So that's 20 times a day I see the lighthouse. And so as I was traveling, I keep looking at the windows and things. I'm always kind of curious of how things were built and why they did this and that. And so I really got curious about the windows, especially in the lighthouse. You will think they're kind of out of uniform, but when we get to that part, you'll kind of, you know, this is just my little research why I think they are like they are. We'll get started though. Thank you again for you all coming out. Hope you enjoy yourself. Anybody wants to speak up and say you're wrong or I heard it this way, please do. Because we all got different stories. You know, we all see the same event, but when you write it down, it's always going to be something different. We're going to leave something out, we're going to add something. So that's just the way it is. But I love that. It's like carving decoys. You can give everybody a mallet and carve it. Guess what? They're all going to look different when you're done. Just the way us humans are. I want to start, go way back about 1524, long time ago. And about then, the French started coming over across the Atlantic Ocean. Basically, they went south. The current, the Gulf Stream, took them south and then back up by us. That's just the way it worked. Okay, not so much as wind brought them here in sails, because I don't see how their boat sailed at all, not like we have now. But anyway, mostly it was current that brought them here. And so as they would come by, their first encounter with shoals was down around Wilmington, what we call frying pan shoals today. And you got Cape Fear River. So once they got past that, they began to look at the land as they would go by. No way to get above, but they could look as they passed by. So they started making maps. They started drawing maps. And some of those maps did not have inlets where we see them today. They're just not there. Beaufort Inlet is some maps. Beaufort Inlet is not here. That land just starts all the way down south and goes right by Beaufort Inlet, what we see called Beaufort Inlet now. Well, that happens still today, doesn't it? Hurricanes will change things right before our eyes. Overnight, we got something different the next morning when we wake up and look at how things happen. This particular fella here, this is Arthur Barlow. He came 60 years later in 1564. Okay, now he's working for Walter Raleigh. We all know about Walter Raleigh. Okay, so we know about Walter Raleigh and what he was trying to do over here to America. So this is Barlow, Arthur Barlow, and so as he comes along, he decides to go ashore once in a while, and he found people here living on these Outer Banks. Sure did. Found Indians too. We were all living together. No kind of wars or fighting going on. Did anybody that I can find. They just got along. So that was Arthur. A little bit later, that would be 1886. I hope I go the right direction. Here we go. 1886, this is Ralph Lane. He's a famous captain and he's also working under Riley. And so he comes over, same route, they take the same route. And so he records in some of his recordings as they followed the shoals and the Outer Banks. When it came to an end and it kind of jetted off back into the ocean, there's a real deep harbor there. Cape Lookout Bight. Okay? That's what he discovered. He does mention it was real easy to maintain their ships. And what I'm thinking there is because the tide falls so much, it was probably an accident. They were anchoring, all of a sudden, here she was exposed. And 6 hours later, she was floating again. That's probably what he was talking about. It made it easy to repair their vessels here in the Hook of the Cape. Spain was here, you know about our Spanish horses, our Mustangs to Shackford. So the horses were here. That happened a little bit earlier in the mid-1500s. Ralph was afraid that the Spanish would find out where he was. And so what he started doing was leaving lookout posts. Lookout. He was leaving places for his men to look out to see if anybody was coming from the rear, to see where he was. And more than likely, one of those spots, perfect spot, is where Cape Lookout is. Goes out into the ocean. You could set up a little tower on those sand dunes. You could see pretty far out into the ocean. Okay? But his expedition sort of failed. It didn't work out like they thought. So now, we got Francis Drake comes along. Now he had all the folks, several hundred people, horses, cattle. I think it was like 15 or 20 ships, maybe more. He came along with the folks that later became the Lost Colony. So he came up the same route. There was no inlet there, so he had to go on around the Cape to go up further. But there was an inlet there by Ocracoke, and Ocracoke was not called that. It had a different name back then. So anyway, that's how he got into Pamlico Sound. And of course, he went on further up to what we know now is Maniou and the Lost Colony. Now, people down East Carolina will argue with you right quickly that they are part of that Lost Colony. Their dialect goes right along with the English language and could very well be true. You can look at the inlets and it's pretty close to what's north of us, and so it could have very well happened back then. So Cape Lookout actually became a place where people or ships would come and they would stop. There was plenty of food. Matter of fact, a story to say the fish jumped in their boats. Well, I've been in Mulleton, and the mullet will jump in your boat when they get all nervous and excited. Yeah, they'll jump right in the skiff with you. And they'll knock you down. They weigh about 6 pounds. I mean, that'd be a good blow to the head, you know. So that's true. Mullet fish do jump in the boat occasionally. So I agree with that. It became a place where people would stop in the Cape, and like I say, it was plenty of food. There was people here, and occasionally people would jump ships. They would leave their ship and not want to go back to England. My great-great-grandfather, James B. Guthrie Sr., did the same thing. He didn't want to go back to England. He liked the Cape, and so he settled to the Cape. And that's where part of my family come is from James B. Guthrie. And so it did happen. So now you got the Europeans mixing in with the other folks that live here. So you know, pretty soon your hair's going to get blonde and you're going to change, you know, your looks. And that's just the way it happens. So Cape Lookout became a very important spot. It is really about midway between the opening to Chesapeake Bay and Charleston. So as time went on, we have larger ships, and mostly, if you read about shipwrecks along our coast, most of them were carrying lumber. There's a lot of lumber left down south, Georgia, South Carolina, and on the way up to New York. So most of the shipwrecks was lumber, and so it became a very popular spot for ships to come and stop and keep on. But it had a big problem was those shoals out there. Now, if you'll search back some stories The old timers used to call those shoals diamond shoals, not Cape Lookout shoals. They always called them diamond shoals. Of course, now today, if you look at your chart, Diamond Shoals is off of Cape Hatteras. But actually, the Diamond Shoals was here. Matter of fact, Diamond City really didn't get a name until the mid-1800s. Then people have been living there hundreds of years, but nobody's thought about a name for it until the mid-1850s. So a lot of information got lost, not recording stuff, but that's the way that happened. So here we are, ships are getting aground, and we need to do something. We need to do something because people were dying. They were getting drowned, and nobody out there to save them. And so the very first lighthouse was constructed. The very first lighthouse was constructed between the years of 1804 and 1812. And it was always called the 1812 Lighthouse. If you go to the Cape now, if you kind of look northeast, there's a little sand dune. There is some debris there. That's the foundation, what was left from that original lighthouse. That nobody's touched it. You can see it very easy. It had it had two problems mainly. The height of it is only 96 feet to the very top. And the light at the top, as you can see, was actually candles in a circle. They were very dim, and they did not flash. I mean, they did not go on and off like we see now. This is red. They were red and white stripes, horizontal stripes, as you can see right here, is how it was built. But it was there for about 47 years, a long time, that we just had to deal with it. So then, later on, we decided to build this lighthouse right here. This lighthouse would be the first lighthouse to be constructed at this height along the coast of North Carolina. It was started in 1857, and it was completed November the 1st of 1859. They turned the switch on that very day, or they went and lit the candle there and to produce the power to turn it on. It is 163 feet high. Pam, is there any way I can get rid of that? Is that going to be there? Can't help it.
I don't think you can get rid of it.
Oh, it's all right. Where was it? It's 163 feet high, so that's a lot higher than that very first lighthouse. Matter of fact, these diamonds, these white diamonds, this one is 60 feet, and this one is 40 feet height, to point to point. So right about here, the lights went out. the cloud went by.
No,
Don't worry, that's all right.
it's not in
That's
the
okay.
program.
I know, I understand. So right here, from here to the base is 60 feet. That's as high as our bridge here. The bridge coming across over here to very high. This one's 40 feet, so that original lighthouse was just about right here. In comparison to this one, that's about 100 feet. And this one here is 30 feet. So you got 130 feet from right here all the way to the base is the lighthouse. The base of it is 28.5 feet in diameter, and the top of it is about 13.5 feet in diameter. When it was originally built, it did not have any diamonds on it. It was just red bricks. So here comes along an issue. We can't, the problem was, the argument was, we can't see it in daylight hours. Very good, because it's red bricks. Well, down the shoreline is a red lighthouse. Up here's a red lighthouse. So it's very hard to distinguish where you were, especially if you're 15 miles offshore. Okay? So you think about up in a crow's nest with a spyglass trying to determine where you are, and you're underway, it was a very hard thing to do. Okay? So in 1873, all that changed. That's when they decided to put the diamonds on the lighthouse. The very first lighthouse along our coast, of course, is Bald Head Island down in Wilmington, and then Ocracoke is next, and then this lighthouse here will be the third one. The year it was built, it was the second tallest lighthouse in the United States. Right now, we do have about 1,000 that is in operation. A lot of them up north around the Great Lakes. They're not very high up. but we do have about 1,000 that is in operation all over our country. The Statue of Liberty now is considered a lighthouse. But right now it still ranks about number 5 in height of it. So it's still pretty high lighthouse in comparison to that first one. Of course, our tallest lighthouse in the United States is Cape Hatteras at 193 feet. So figure another 30 feet on this one is pretty high up. The lighthouse, I'll get back to the diamonds. The lighthouse, a very neat thing they've done. I've heard several stories. I've heard the diamonds actually were supposed to be squares instead of diamonds. They were supposed to be squares. And so this is a Sonny Williams story I'm going to tell you right here. You all know about Sonny and him. Well, this is a Sonny story about the diamonds. I don't have any painters in here, do I? Anybody paint for a living? Okay, I don't. Anyway, I paint, but anyway. He said, Heber, let me tell you, painters, you know how they are on the weekend, they like to hit the bottle, and Monday morning they're not able to do much painting. So Monday morning, the superintendent came out and said, guys, here's a pattern, this square. I want you to climb up the lighthouse and start the very first pattern, and there'll be squares all the way down to the bottom. And so you got a guy over here with the end, and the other guy's over here. And this guy over here, for some reason, lets that end go. And that pattern just swings. And you got a point there, and you got a point there. And you got a perfect diamond, don't you? And as the story goes, good enough for the government. Now that's Sonny's story about the diamonds. But anyway, the unique thing about these is they serve as a compass. The black diamonds are true north and south, so we're on the south side right here of the lighthouse. And the white diamonds are east and west. And a lot of the old timers would actually use that coming in from the ocean. They could spot the lighthouse. They know exactly what side the inlet was on to come in Barnes Inlet or even Beaufort Inlet. I have heard some of them say they could tell how far off they were by how many diamonds they could see too. You know, as you go further away, the earth has a curve. We're on a spear. The earth is a spear. So naturally, the further away you go, the lower that lighthouse is going to look. Matter of fact, standing on the edge of the beach, looking out across the ocean, you can only see about 2.5 miles. I mean, if it was somebody out there waving their hand, you would not see him past 2.5 miles. You wouldn't see, because there's that much curve in the earth just in 2.5 miles, you know. But think about that. No matter where you are, you'll always be on the crown of the earth, right? Yep, we're on the crown of the earth right here. Today, right here. The light that was in it, the very first light, was what they call the first order Fresnel lens. They're about 8 foot high. You can see it in this picture. There's the beam, but actually the top of it goes way up in here. Years ago, they had one on display in the Maritime Museum. I'm not sure if it's there anymore, but they are huge. And it is still in there? Is it? It's huge, and this little glass prisms in it, just get all the way around it. And what happens when you turn that little 40 watt bulb on, or no more than a 60 watt bulb, it will distort that light. Off at the distance, that whole thing will glow. Very neat invention that we had in this very first lighthouse. This is a very early picture. You can see how narrow the channel is here compared to today. Today's right back here. Here's the kitchen. The water comes right by here now. All that water has consumed all that over the past 56 years or so. These poles here is actually telegraph line put over there in 1903, and it runs right past the lighthouse all the way to the Coast Guard station. And I have heard it goes all the way. When it was there, it went all the way to Portsmouth, Virginia. The poles did. Okay. This building here was built in 1903. Now, when the lighthouse was completed and the other one was torn down, they decided they needed a keeper and an assistant keeper. And at one time, they both stayed in this building, which was built in 1873. They both lived in here. Eventually, they moved one of them out, and they built this building here in 1907. and it was used up until 1958. It is still over there to the Cape. It's just moved down to the shoreline to where you go in the village. It was sold on auction for $600. And the owner, which was Barden, it's called Barden's Inlet, where his sons, or might have been him, yeah, it was him. They bought it and they moved it down the shoreline, but it is still over there. It's a wood structure. It's held up pretty good over these years since then. I said this building was built in 1873, and it was built from the bricks that was remaining from the construction of the Bodie Lighthouse, which was built in 1872. So they're not the same bricks, the lighthouse here. They came from Bodie Lighthouse, which is very similar to this lighthouse. If they weren't painted, they would look pretty close. And Currituck too are very similar to the shape and the height of them. So let's see here. I don't think that building's there anymore. You guys got any questions so far? Am I making sense? Thank you. Here's a little, this is actually inside of the keeper's quarter over there. The lower floor is a sort of a museum. And we have people, volunteers, that actually live in that during the summer months. They stay about 3 weeks out the month. They have a little UTV they can use, some good perks by staying over there. But basically, you're just there when people come in, to ask questions and so forth. But this was inside of it, gives you some idea of the lighthouse. Now, if you see right here, something very interesting right here. We tell everybody the lighthouse is 9 feet thick at the base. Well, it might be from the outside to the inside of the stairwell, but as you see right here, there is a cavity there. It's not bricks all the way across. There is a cavity there, okay? And was it Chris Young was that day? Were you over here that day? He said he heard it was filled with sand as they was building it. This cavity was. So it's not, My friend of mine used to work on the ferry, and he passed away a couple months ago, James Dixon. And his folks are from Portsmouth, so I know he heard a lot of stories. And he used to tell me, Heber, one of the workers fell inside the lighthouse, and they couldn't get him. And I said, James, I can't tell tourists that. He said, well, I'm just telling you what I heard. I said, well, I hate to tell people stuff like that. They didn't get the guy. But it could be true. You see how he could have got down his cavity, and they're way up here. They couldn't have got him. But that's the only thing I heard about that from him. He was a character. Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about the construction of the lighthouse. The lighthouse, one of the problems right now with the lighthouse, too much paint on it. It's being painted over and over and over and over, so it's too much paint, and the bricks are not breathing. You know what I mean? The certain amount of moisture needs to go through the bricks to keep them tight. So that's not happening now. So on the inside, they're drying out, and of course there's sand. It's just sand and clay, and so they're starting to crumble, which is not good. So that's one of the big issues to repair is the paint. But this right here, if you walk real close to it, I know you all in the back probably can't see, but if you walk right up to it, the lighthouse kind of tells you how it was constructed. And how it's constructed is what they call the English bond. One brick, if you think about one brick, it has to be made. A brick has to be made so no matter any way you turn it, another or two or three or multiple bricks will fit on it in that same length. So this is what they call a stretcher. We're used to seeing them, they're flat. All right. So if you turn it up like this, it's called a soldier. If you turn it like this, it's called a sailor. Okay? If you turn it like this, it's called a header. All right? And if you turn it like this, it's called a rowlock. You see them under windows a lot in our houses. You'll see they're little like this right here. They're called rowlocks. But this lighthouse here, basically, a very, very simple construction when you think about it. If you start to the base, they go up 5 courses. Now, you know what a course is. That's a run all the way around. They go up 5 courses of stretchers, and then here's a header. And that goes all the way around. So what that's telling you right away is there's another wall inside of it, just like the outside wall, and that header sits on top of that inner wall, and that ties it together as it goes up. Okay? And we've always heard double wall. Well, that's what the double wall means. Okay? At the time, it was the strongest way to build a wall. Matter of fact, I had a friend went to Ocracoke. They attended that lighthouse. I said, please take me a picture. I think I got one inside that lighthouse. I want to see, and sure enough, it is. Cape Hatteras is also this English bond method of building something. But what they've done, as the walls get, can you all see back there? You see right here? You see your headers right here? Can you kind of see the ends of them? And then here's your stretchers. Boom, 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 and there comes your headers again. Kind of see how that works? I know it's hard to see way back there. Here's a good shot right here. See your headers right here? Then you got your stretchers, and then you got headers. Okay? That's how it was done. There's a shot inside of, there's right here. See them? See right here? Now they are right up here. Okay? Now this little boy was helping me this day, and you'll never believe what his name turned out to be. And we're talking about bricks now. You know it takes clay and sand to make brick? Well, his name is Clay, and he's from Clayton, North Carolina. How about that? Could I be any luckier that day? I told him he was going to be in my show one day. This is the keeper's quarters, built the same way, very same method. The keeper's quarters was. You might see them a little better right here. Here's your Fresnel lens. That's not the one over there, but that's how it looks. They are huge. And of course, you got light on it, so it's very hard to see what it does, after it gets dark. Our light actually now is in Block Island, New York, in the lighthouse. That's where it ended up. How, I don't know. Here's the inside of one. See, here's your lights right here. Here's your lights right here, and it just does a beautiful job. Very smart people. There's a better shot of one right there. Let me see, I'm going to get, forgive me for some of this stuff being out of whack here. I want to show you that thing right there. Okay, right here. All right, when you ride by and look at the lighthouse, you don't realize this is actually, when you ride by, that's where the paintings start, but when you're off in the water, you don't realize this projects out about this far beyond the wall of the lighthouse. And what this is a floor. It's a floor to what they call the service room. Okay? That floor goes all the way across the lighthouse. All the way across it. So it's a pretty neat thing they did to help, do a little bit of architectural to the lighthouse to let it come on the outside of it. But that's what that is. They call this the capital. When you have a column and the top of it turns out, they call that capital. All that is done with bricks. Can you all still hear me in the back? Sound like it's echoing right up here. That's called a capital. And to me, that's the prettiest part of the lighthouse right there. I love that part of the lighthouse right here. Isn't it pretty? Yep. I mentioned the formation of bricks. They did not use any soldiers or sailors or rowlocks, but right here, you will see right here that window, they call that a lintel. And that's solid masonry, whatever they use, right above that window. That is to handle that extra weight above that window right there, so it won't be weak. Okay? This is the light that's in it now, right here. What they call an LED light. It is, all the Cape Lookout is solar powered. Right now. There's two separate fields or whatever you want to call it, panels, but the lighthouse is solar panel. And the lighthouse, all lighthouses has a particular flash pattern. That way in nighttime you can tell where you are just by the flash pattern. And the lighthouse here is every 15 seconds. So if you're riding by offshore or inshore, you can count 15 seconds. If it comes on and off, you're at Cape Lookout. Further down or above us, they are different. The same way about the diamonds. The diamonds is what they call day markers. There's day markers actually here to the inlet. There's no lights on them, but they help ships when they come to find the inlet. when they're offshore, they can line up with those day markers. It used to be one there by the old post office, I remember, way up high on a tower. I had some friends in high school jumped off it one day, out there in the water. That was brings me. Anyway, you know how seniors are in May when school's getting out. You know, they'll jump off anything. The moons, they could get to it. But anyway, that's called a day marker when the lighthouses are painted. That way, during daylight hours, you notice Cape Lookout. Haddles, of course, has got the stripes. Bodie has got the horizontal ones. Currituck is just red. They left that the same. And the ones down that way, Bald Head Island, is that gray color. So they all look different, very important to miners back that time in years getting by the Cape here. A little bit better shot here. Yeah, see right here? Well, this window is inside of the service room, right here. Of course, this is your balcony, and they call this part the lantern room. It's called the lantern room right here. All right. And right now, a lot of this needs repair too. It don't look like it in the picture, but there's a lot of metal up there. This needs to be taken care of. Okay. This actually was taken one afternoon, had just rained, and it looks like it's got gloss paint on it. Now, it looks like it's a good coat of semi-gloss on it. The lighthouse has 10 full-size diamonds. I'm talking about these right here. Your white diamonds actually is the smallest. The top one is the very smallest of the diamonds, of all the diamonds, and the one to the bottom is the largest. This one here is 30 feet, and this one here is only 60 feet. Okay? There is 10 windows in the lighthouse. There's 207 steps to the top, but coming down only seems like 150. I mean, you know how gravity helps us older people out. See, I can say that because I are one, right, Louis? I can talk about old people because I are one. I'm there now. So anyway, 10 windows, 10 diamonds, 7 landings. So that means as you're climbing, you can stop and rest. And most of the time they are by a window. I'm not sure if they all are because there's more windows than there are landings. So anyway, usually they put them that landing where a window is so you can stop and look out. Earlier I mentioned about the windows. Now think about when it was built, there was no diamonds on it. So kind of imagine no diamonds on it. And 1859, we had no idea about electricity. Matter of fact, it was 75 years before electricity came over there. So they had no idea about electricity, but they did have something that come up every day and set every day. They had the sun. They knew about the sun. And so these diamonds are actually, not so much on the north side, but the east and west side, you would think if you built that and you knew diamonds were going to be and windows, guess what? More than likely you would put those windows right center of those diamonds, wouldn't you? That's why I see but this is not that way. It's not that way. So what I believe they done, if you're over there in July, the longest day ever, June, the shadow, the sun comes up, and actually the shadow is way over here. Now this is an evening shot. So you got the sun over here now. But the shadow is way over here in the summer months. But guess what? The sun is going right straight down the line of those windows. You know what I'm saying? They had 2 years, or at least a year, to study what that sun was doing. My land, that's a whole lot louder when I'm talking. I know you're on the back. Have you heard anything I said? Okay, thank you. Do you understand? No. When you go on the other side, the west side, the windows are the same thing. They are closer. They're not due or not center in the west side. They're a little bit northwest side. So in the afternoons in July, the sun actually sets way over to the west. There's only 2 days of the year that the days is equal. That's in March coming up and in September. Other than that, that's how we roll. That's how the earth rolls. That's what we're doing. Right now we're rolling. We're going that way. We're tilting this away towards the sun. Every day, a little bit closer, a little bit longer. Okay? So that takes care of 6 windows. You got 3 here, you got 3 over here, now you got 4 left. Well, on the back side, they are very high up. Well, why would you put them high up? Well, think about summer months. The sun is very high. Okay? It's almost overhead over there. You feel like it is. So I feel like they put those windows up high to capture that light in the middle of the day to shine down in the stairwell. So it's like 75 years later before any power came. So they didn't know. But they did know that they had to use the sunlight as much as possible. And I feel like that's what they did. The windows are not very big. They're really not. They're only about a 2 by 3 at that much. Very small windows. Okay? Any questions?
Did they use local people to build it, like to lay the brick?
I'm not sure. There's not a lot of information about the construction. I have heard $45,000 to build it. You know, that sort of stuff that we know. And I did hear that only 2 brick masons actually laid all the bricks. I've heard that story too. Just 2 men did the masonry work. And if you think about it, that might be a good idea, not to get everybody confused. You know, now they start way down there and start all over the house now laying bricks. You know, but maybe that weren't the case then. Maybe we say, hey, you know, we want this done right here. Right about here, see this window right here? Right about here, if you follow that pattern, like I said, 5 stretchers, right about there, it becomes 3 stretchers and a header. And the reason why, you got to visualize the stairwell is inside, and that's not tapered. That's going right straight up. And so right about here is where this wall meets the stairwell wall. And from there on up, the wall is only about 18 inches thick, not as thick as the rest of it. And I feel like that's where they started closing in the bricks to make it a little bit stronger as they got up to the top of it. So that's just about this window right here. Okay, pretty afternoon. You might see the bricks a little better in this shot right here. See your headers right here? And then you got those right above it. Some people ask me, well, where did they get the bricks? Where did they get the bricks made? Well, where I live is in Gloucester, and right next to us is a little town called Straits. And a guy told me, I know some of you in this local know J.M. Brown, very knowledgeable fellow back in the day. I mean, he would stretch the truth now and then, but I felt like if half of it was true, it was true, you know. And he used to tell me, and I look, every time I go through there, I look where he tells me. He said, when you get off of the Harkers Island Road and you go towards your house, which you'll pass by what we call Ned Golden's, his rental property, the road kind of wide, there's a little creek, which is Whitish's Creek, the head of Whitish's Creek. He said, if you'll look past that highway, that little creek goes on out there further. He said, way back in the day, there was a keel there. They made bricks there. And as a matter of fact, along the shorefront of Gloucester, there's a little area they do call Brickyard Landing. And one night floundering, lo and behold, there was bricks on the bottom. I saw them. And I looked at my son, I said, look at here, here's bricks out here in the water. So they could have fell off a barge, been there all that time, I don't know. I have been told by a fellow from Otway, y'all familiar with Otway, Crow Hill Road, there was a keel down there too. So they could have made them in those 2 places very easily. I have been told on Browns Island used to be a lot of clay. So they could have got their clay right there to Browns Island, not very far. You're talking less than about 6 miles from the lighthouse. Would you think more than 6 miles from the lighthouse, Browns Island? Probably about like that. So it could have been done really, really close to us. But no, ma'am, I don't know about who the people were, their names, or anything that could have done that. Here's a shot, hard to tell right there. Another one. This is up when you're getting ready to go. The stairwell kind of ends and you go up on this deck. Actually, you crawl through a hatch. If you've ever been to the Lighthouse, it's kind of weird how you get out there. It's not a door. just like a hatch out of a ship is how you get out there on it. So lighthouses are finished in 1859, 1860, the Civil War comes along. And the Confederate was afraid that we would be captured, and so they took that Fresnel lens out of it in 1861. And sure enough, Cape Lookout Lighthouse and around here was captured. And so there was no light on in it for about 2 years. The Union did figure out to get a way to get a light in it, and in less than a year, the Confederate decided if we can't have a light in it, nobody is, and so we're going to blow up the lighthouse. And so they set off a charge down in the bottom of it, and it did go off, but as you can see, very little damage. I think all the boys got out of it. It was a real bad headache. They're probably still doing their head like that right now, what happened in there. So I tell people it could withstand an explosion, and it actually did. It's probably been about probably 5 or 6 different lights put in it. I know I've heard people talk about it. They used to have one with a wick in it. It was real smutty. And as a matter of fact, every 4 hours they would cut that wick off and start over, relight it and start over. Matter of fact, they had a nickname, Wickies. Keeper had a nickname, Wicky, because you were cutting the wick off every 4 hours. I was over to Taylor School yesterday talking to some third graders, and a little boy asked me, why did they build that lighthouse so close to the water? Now, how are you going to answer that question? Only a third grader. You talk about, you think out the box, well, they don't have a box now. They just, But anyway, good stuff. I like it. This is Ocracoke right here. This is Ocracoke Lighthouse, and it's very hard to tell from the back. But if you look over here, you can detect where that English bond was used to build their lighthouse. Now, their lighthouse is not very tall at all. It's still Ocracoke. This is Cape Hatteras, inside of Cape Hatteras. If you can see on the back wall, you can see the same thing going on there. This is Cape Hatteras here. Very pretty lighthouse, Cape Hatteras is. Huge inside of it. It's about 20% bigger than ours. So instead of our base is 28 feet, they're almost 40 feet. Pretty huge to the base of it. A lot of folks will say, well, I know they built Lighthouse, well, what about the foundation? Well, they moved Cape Hatteras in 1999. And they dug down to the bottom of it. It was about 7 foot deep. They finally got to the bottom of it. And it was wood there. It was yellow pine there. It was sitting on, in water. So more than likely, this lighthouse probably used the same thing. Sometimes underwater, no hours getting into it, it'll last forever. So it could be. It was built later, so I felt like they would have had something better than we did, but, it might not. The lighthouse was without a light a couple years during the Civil War, and the next time it was without a light was during World War II. On the Cape during World War II, there's a lot of activity over there, and I tell some of the tourists, I say, people live inland of us, had no idea they were a long ways from the war over in Europe, but it was not the case along North Carolina and Virginia coast. And the reason before that is because of the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream's only about 25, 30 miles, sometimes even closer. It does move. My captain, my charter boat tell me the Gulf Stream does move back and forth, so it does get closer at times. And so the Army, Navy, and the Merchant Marines used that Gulf Stream to help move their very slow cargo ships back and forth across the Atlantic. They used that same current that our forefathers did to come here. The Gulf Stream comes south, it turns right off of Cape Lookout, and the Labrador Current is above us, and it turns right off of Cape Hatteras and goes right straight across to Europe. So it was very easy to get in that Gulf Stream. The problem was that Adolf Hitler knew about this too. And so he assigned subs, we call them U-boats, to come over. And the first month of the war, we lost over 40 ships right off our coast of North Carolina. Right now, there's 80 out there off of our coast that got sunk during World War II. We got smarter. The subs could not stay surface very long because they had to charge, or submerge very long because they had to stop and they'd charge batteries. So that kind of helped us to find them, and we began to attacking them, and so things got turned around. During the war on Cape Lookout, the Coast Guard station was there. It was built in 1915. It's still there right here today, same one. And so the Coast Guard was there. The Army was actually the Army had sort of took over the area where the station is, and they had 2 6-inch guns down on what we call the gun mounts. They were sitting on sand dunes, and they were placed there to protect Barnes Inlet and Beaufort Inlet. They had a range of about 10 miles, and so that's what the Army done. Now, if you go over there today, you will not see them gun mounts. If you look real good on low tide, you might see the roof of them out into the ocean. So the erosion has swept away a lot of sand. Unbelievable what goes on over there from year to year. The Coast Guard's job, they will patrol the beaches day and night looking for any enemy trying to get to our shorelines. And so, but basically what they did find was they recovered bodies that had been killed and had washed ashore on our beaches. If you all ever get a chance to visit Ocracoke, on the backside of Ocracoke, the cemetery, there's 4 British sailors got killed during the war, and the Ocracoke people buried them right there in their own cemetery. Very neat thing the British government done there. There is a story, well, actually this is true. In 1942, the Coast Guard actually sunk a sub. She's about 20 miles south of here. And down on the waterfront here, not Discovery Diving, it was a diving company that actually has some artifacts in their building that came off of that sub. Olympus. Is it Olympus? Yeah. Okay, yeah, good people. I know they have the gun, used to have the gun that come off the bow, and several other artifacts they got from that sub. Right now she's laying on her side, and so people don't scuba dive on her like they used to. Pine Knolls Aquarium in the big tank, I call it, they got sort of a replica of that submarine in there. Them fish swimming out of that. That's what that's for, is that sub. So anyway, the Coast Guard did sink her in 1942. They had a crew of about 44 men. Majority of them did escape and got off of her. In 1992, they had a reunion right here in Morehead City. Friend against foe, talked about the war, what happened. A lot of them had passed away by then. Anyway, our question was, did you all ever get close to our beaches? And nobody would admit yes or no, but I've always heard a story that on Cape Lookout, there was a sailor found on the beach. He had got killed and washed ashore. And in his top pocket of his uniform was a ticket to the Morehead City Theater. Y'all heard that story? Yep. So there you go. He walked right down Reno Street here. My brother-in-law was from Davis, and he used to tell me during the summer months, sometimes a little kid would come in the village with a little weird-looking gas can, and all he wanted was a gallon of gas, or maybe 2 gallons. He'd get it and leave and never see him no more. So that could have been Germans too. They got off the coast here. They have rafts on those subs. He could have got ashore very easily. So there's a lot of other stories about the war. Now the Lighthouse, like I said, did not operate during the whole time of World War II. So it was, just those 2 times it didn't work. I wish I could say that about this LED light, because that don't work. That don't work sometimes either. Lord help, we had to depend on that now to navigate. Why, land, we would have some shipwrecks. But anyway, yeah, that's a lot of stuff on World War II. I've heard my parents say Harkers Island, very close to the beach. They had headlight shields on their vehicles, so night you only had like half of your headlight working, and sometimes no tail lights. You pull your shades down, very conscious of light coming, they seeing light or whatever. But evidently it didn't bother them if they come to Morehead City, walk right down the street here. So a lot of very interesting stuff during the war. Right now, the lighthouse is being closed now since 2020. We're here in 2025. They're thinking they'll have all this work done. We're hearing $8 million for the outside, stuff like that. And of course, we're losing beach. The beach is going away too, so there's a lot, somebody's...
They're supposed to dredge it though. I think Jeff West said 2025, something like that. Either next year or year after next, because you've got to go through a lot of blue, red, I said.
Yeah, blue and red tape. Yeah, and white tape.
Blue and red
And white.
green and orange.
And black, a lot of black tape too, I imagine. So anyway, that's going on. I was out there Thursday before last. We've started our season, and I was a deckhand Thursday, and we did notice one of the channels had kind of straightened out on its own. That's since Christmas. We've not been going out there because the dock got damaged. But the captain said, "Look how this channel looks." I said, "How about this?" So we had to move our buoys over to take care of that. So it's just a constant movement out there of sand. It's just unbelievable. I know last summer, I believe it was summer to fall, we had what they call the king tide, where it kind of works the opposite too. All that water goes somewhere else, where at least here is very, very shallow. And we had people walk, I know they could walk probably a mile out into the ocean on shoals and not get wet. It was just amazing to see how far they would go. Of course, they had the nice, pretty shells too. Everybody wants a helmet and a big conch shell, and that's where they are. They are way, way out there. Let's see if anything. This is the house, the quarters. That's where it's sitting now. That's this new location. This is the Guthrie Gaskell house, and it was built by Clem Gaskell. Now Clem was a school teacher over there, and they had a school after Diamond City kind of left because of storms. More people moved over to the Cape Lookout side, and so this was and Clem was a school teacher. And he built this house in about 1915, and in 1921, my great uncle Odell Guthrie, he bought it in 1921, and he owned it until 1951. And he sold it to Keith, that passed away a couple months ago. He sold it to Keith Willis from Marshallburg. But this is a very good shape. This is the original life-saving station built in 1888. Now, I know you've all heard the story of the Chrissy Wright that came ashore was so cold. We always hear colder than the Chrissy Wright come ashore. Well, the Chrissy Wright came ashore in 1886 in January. Most of the bad shipwrecks that people lost their lives will either be December, January, or it's always those cold months because you are just open to the elements. You just can't do it, especially if you're wet. So that's most of the time when people lost their lives is those cold, very cold months. So anyway, 1886, the Chrissy Wright came ashore not too far from the inlet, and then right after that, they built this building in 1888. Now, the Coast Guard station was not there. This is what they call a life-saving service, and this is the original building. According to Jeff West, our director, the National Park Service record, he says structurally the house is in very good shape. It's just some stuff on the outside. There's been some additions done to it. It was moved. It used to sit down where the Coast Guard station is. And it was bought back in the early 60s, surplus, and it was moved here to this location. And right now it's called the Kelly Willis House. Kelly used to take the mail over to the Cape. They had a post office there too. I'll tell you a little bit about the school. My grandmother, Missouri, went to the school over there when it was over on Diamond City side, and she used to tell us they only had one book. And the book had a nickname, because I find it, but it's not named what she called it. But anyway, it was called the Blueback Speller. It had about 4 or 5 chapters in it, basic English language, reading and math, the basic stuff. And she said, Heber, once you learn the book, you graduate from school. There's no other book to study from. You could teach the class. You knew as much as the teacher did. That was it. Yes, ma'am.
Where is this one located now?
This is, let's see how I can tell you. This is north of the Coast Guard station. Where the Coast Guard is back this way from the station is. You need an aerial photo. Maybe I get.
The one by Fort Naked?
No, Cape Lookout.
Oh.
Cape Lookout.
Oh.
These buildings, if you look at this one and Portsmouth, all these buildings was constructed. They are very similar. They look a lot alike. Well, it turns out they were actually kits. They were actually assembled up north and shipped down here and put back together. And they didn't have a lot of metal fasteners, so they used wood. They used pegs and wood. and some of it is actually built like you would a ship. So maybe that's why it's lasted all these many years. But Jeff told us they estimated about $400,000 to get it back. They want to raise it up higher. See, right now it's just sitting right on the ground. They want to raise it up higher and do some stuff to it. The tower is missing from it. Originally it had a tower so they could see out over the ocean there. This was the boathouse attached to that building. And David Yeomans, y'all familiar with David Yeomans, he's a county commissioner, post office postmaster for many years. And so this was David's summer home. But they have did a very good job dressing it up. He had a porch on it. They've removed all that stuff, so it kind of looks like it did originally. This is the summer kitchen. This is down on the edge of the beach, and the water's almost to that. This is what it looked like. This is the original life-saving station they had over there. And if you'll look right over here is the lighthouse. See right here? That's the lighthouse. Look, no trees, no sand, no sand dunes, just a flat land. Okay? Up until 1960, there was horses and cattle on the Cape Lookout side. And of course, they were eating everything. Nothing would grow. Of course, they would eat it as soon as it come up. So they were removed, and then in 1969, Boy Scout troops from down east came over and they planted little pine seeds. I remember they used to give them to us in school, little saplings. And so they started the vegetation you see there now. Boy Scouts started that whole thing. And as time went on and the trees got tall and produced pine cones and stuff and seeds, then the birds took over. So there's another Sonny Weaver story. He said, Heber, let me tell you. He said, that if you think about it, he said, that telegraph wire was there, and it came right by the lighthouse, went right onto the station. I said, yep. He said, well, you follow that forage, and where's that at? Because he said birds would eat the seed, they'd sit on the wire, they'd drop the seed, it was automatically fertilized, and a couple of weeks, you probably had a tree coming up. That's Sonny's story. Here's some numbers that I run. We do know Cape Hatteras, it took 2.5 million bricks to build Cape Hatteras. And so we're about 20% smaller. So if you look at that number, we're about 2 million bricks over there. And a brick weighs about a little over about 4.5 pounds. Okay? So there's your tonnage of bricks, your cement. All this is based on like 1,000 bricks, the leg, you know what I mean? Just a quick way to do it. Anyway, this is sort of a guess, the staircase and all that business, but anyway, I come up with about almost 8,000 tons the lighthouse weighs, almost as much as a U.S. Navy destroyer. So it's not going to blow off of the Cape Lookout. No. This was taken in the afternoon. We do trips in the summer months. We call it the sunset cruise. It's about 2 hours long. And actually, this is a reflection of the sun in those panels up here is what you're seeing. It does look like the light's working, but anyway, this gives you another view. Now, this is on the west side. See your windows? Look where they are, right in a line, right straight up in a line. They're not over in the center of the diamond. They're offset of the diamond. And you can see kind of where the shadow is right here, way over here. Probably the most famous picture is this side of the lighthouse, actually the north side. And it's always a shadow on those diamonds. Maybe that's why it makes a good picture. Those diamonds are always shaded during the summer months because the sunlight never ever gets on, directly on them. This was taken, we do a night in December. The Park Service lights up the lighthouse for like a week and a half. And so we do trips over there. This was year before last. We had a bad experience this past year. It's so cold. But anyway, that was taken of the light working one of those nights over there. Brett, not talk about shit, Brett. What time is it?
It's,
You okay? You all stand up and stretch your legs or anything? We'll take just a little break if you want to. I want to just say a little bit about shipwrecks. I don't talk too much because that could be another, that could be my next one.
Where do we catch your boat out to the lighthouse? Where do we catch your boat out to the lighthouse? Where are you guys?
The trip started at 10 o'clock until 3 is the last trip back home. Harkers Island. It's just Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for right now. When the time changes a couple of weeks, they'll probably go to a full schedule. Yeah. Very reasonable cost. $22 ain't bad to go to Cape Lookout back. You know what I mean? I'm on the boat. I know. Well, we see C2 out there grind, so. Yeah, they get a grind more than we do. Trying to get somebody else off. All right. Oh, here's a shot of the gun. Here's a shot of the gun mounts, right here. See what's left of them? See them right here? That was an extremely low tide right here. Normally you don't see them at all, right here.
Yeah, when I was a teenager, we used to camp out in those on the weekend.
Yep. 1960, my neighbor was a chief in a Coast Guard station over there, Reginald Lewis. And his son was my age, and he would take us over, and we would go. One year, we couldn't get in the gun mounts because of sand. The whole entrance was filled up with sand, almost covered up in sand. And in 1980, that whole erosion started. Until now, they're way off there in the water. Yep. A little bit more of them right there. Let's see here. Oh, here's another shot of them. See how they're rolling over in the ocean right here? See how they're falling? Sad. Now, there's a story here and about when they put the gun mounts there, the Army had trouble getting them down the beach across that sand. And so we had a guy, or Louis and him in their time, Davis had a guy named Dennert Davis. And Dennert moved houses. And think about it, this is back in the 40s. You know, no kind of heavy equipment like we have now. So Dennert had a mule. He had a reel with a line on it, and the mule was out here, and the mule will walk in a circle, and it would wind up that reel. So they got Dennert over here, and he laid boards on top of the sand, which makes sense. He laid a path of boards, and they rolled them guns. They pulled them guns down where they wanted them by Lennert's mule. True story. Yep. This is, I think this is when, I wanted to get a picture, of course she wanted to know about where that was at, about where that village was. Let's see here. All right, this is the light everybody loved. They were put in 1975, and they're called aerial beacons. And actually it was a big old searchlight, and they sit opposite of each other. They were opposite of each other. And the bulb was about this, the bulb was huge, and actually it shined a beam. It was a beam that went across the water. And but anyway, they took them out in 2018 and installed they said it saves $90,000 a year by moving them, by taking them out. All right, I'm going to just tell this one little story about a shipwreck, and then we'll go, okay? On Cape Lookout, this was 1905, and the keeper's name was Gaskell, William Gaskell. And they were in this station there, and it was a real foggy morning, and so he relieved the watch, every 4 hours. So the keeper goes up in the tower, and he looks out towards the shoals, and he saw the top of a mast, and he knew that mast shouldn't be there. I mean, he knew where those shoals were, and he knew that mast should be over here as she was moving and not over here. And so he summons all the crew, and majority of them were sick with influenza. but they all got in what they call the surf boat. There was 8 men rowing the boat, and he steered what they call the coxswain. He did the steering. So they launched her, and they went out to the vessel. Her name was the Sarah D.J. Rawson. It's a very good story. You can find it on the, you can Google it. Very good story. Goes into a lot more detail about what happened. So they were aground on the shoals. And matter of fact, they got aground the morning before. So they had been out there already about 6 hours. Already out there. Nobody knew where they were. So the crew got to them, and like I said before, a load of lumber. The ship was breaking up, so now the lumber was coming out in the water, floating around. So the crew couldn't get close enough to save them because they was afraid that lumber floating and bobbing up and down would damage the surf boat. So they anchored. They anchored, off from her to keep an eye on them. So it went all night. They're still out there in darkness. I can't believe, but anyway, people do something, So all night goes around to the next day. The wind does die out, like it generally does around here. We'll have a hard blow. The next day it'll be calm. That's just the way it is. So they got to them. They finally got to them, and the only way they could get them off is they got a line to them, and they were actually dragging them through the water. They had no way of keeping them above the water. So they drug them through the water one by one. I think it was 7. So they got them all in the surf boat, and they all got back ashore the next day. So it was almost 2-day ordeal. No food, no water. Anyway, they all survived. I have heard the story that the crew they saved had to save the lifesavers because they were all about dead with the illness plus the ordeal they went through. But anyway, they all got a life-saving medal, real beautiful medal. Are they to the museum? Replicas of them?
There are replicas of all the medals at the museum in the tower.
Yeah.
Walter, our former Congressman Walter Jones, had them done and in a ceremony rededicated
Yeah.
those life-saving medals.
Walter Jones had a replica of those medals made, and they're to the museum of all 9 people that was in the ordeal. Now, the weird thing about 5 of those men, when the Chrissy Wright came ashore, they were children. See? So they ended up being in the life-saving service.